So the first tool that we're going to learn how to use in Photoshop is the Clone Stamps tool. And the Clone Stamp tool is really useful for a lot of things. You can use it for duplication. What people use it mostly for is to remove things. So for example, if I had a distraction in the background I wanted to remove, if I wanted to remove like this area here, these knots or metal ties in the wood, I could remove that. If I wanted to remove a birthmark, or a chip in the paint or things like that, I can use the clone stamp to get rid of those. So what I'm going to use it in this case is to get rid of some of our hair flyaways. The first thing I'd really recommend before you do any kind of potentially destructive edit, such as clone stamp, is to duplicate your background. And that should be kind of a first step if you're going to do anything on the actual photo. So to do that, the long way is to go to Layer at the top of the screen, and we're going to choose Duplicate Layer. Okay, this menu is going to come up, and I can rename this layer. So for example, if I'm going to clone stamp it, I can rename it Clone Stamp Layer. Okay, now if you look in the Layers window, Basics on Layer, I've created this new layer here. Okay, so I have my original background, and then above that I have the clone stamp layer I haven't done anything to yet. So I won't see a visible difference until I actually start working on it. That's a long way to create it. So let me go back in my history. If I want to start learning the keyboard shortcuts, I do Command J. Now it's not going to automatically let me rename the layer, but you still can. You just double click where the name is and then rename it. Okay, when I'm working on layers, I need to be careful that I am working on the right one. If I start working on this layer instead, so what I did is I just clicked on it with my mouse, and let's say I was clone stamping something, which I'll go over in a minute, and I'm like, why is this not working? Why is this not working? I'm clone stamping and I don't see anything, or say I was using the brush. This will be really obvious. Nothing's working. But then these little eyeball symbols next to the layer, those will make them invisible if they're off. I turn my layers that are covering it off, and I see I actually was working on my image, just the wrong layer. Okay, so I'm going to go back and get rid of that. Okay, if I turn this layer on and off, I don't see a visible change because I haven't done anything. So again, I want to make sure I'm on this top copy of my layer. All right, next thing I'm going to choose the tool, and the tool window is here. I can manually click on the clone stamp if I recognize it. If you don't, the keyboard shortcut is S for stamp. It'll activate it here. And then if I click and hold down this tool, I can make sure that I'm actually on the clone stamp tool instead of the pattern tool. Okay, the next step, I have to set my tool up in the options window at the top. So this first setting is showing me I'm on clone stamp. This setting here is my options for my size, hardness, and shape. Okay, so there's some weird shapes. We aren't gonna like stamp with a maple leaf. So you just want a round shape, and then you want to customize the size, so I can see that, and also the hardness. So if you're stamping on a blurry area, you don't want a hard brush. Let me show you what that would look like. If I take that area and put it here, you can see that circle. We don't want that. So I would just tell you, estimate what your hardness should be. I'm going to estimate around 30%. And I'm going to estimate my brush size a little bit smaller. And if it's wrong, just undo it and try it again. That's really the key, is just try it. If it doesn't work, undo it, try it again. Okay, mode, we want to say normal. If I want to stamp completely, I want my opacity here and my flow here to say 100. Opacity is how solid or not see-through it is, and flow is the strength of my brush as I do it. So if I want to gradually do it, like let's say I was trying to clone stamp something and just make it fade out, then I could lower the flow or the opacity. So let's say I want to get rid of like this circle here, but only like halfway. Okay, so you can see it kind of like camouflages it instead of just gets rid of it. Okay, in the case of her hair flyaways, I want them gone. So I'm not going to do that. And then lastly, you have to choose what you're sampling. I just want to sample the current layer I'm on in this case. There are times you may want to sample current layer and below or all layers. Okay, next step, really important. If I just start trying to click around, I'm going to get an error message that we saw before. If I do not first choose what I'm stamping from, then it's not going to let me. So imagine this is like an ink bladder. You have to take the ink up with your stamp before you can put it somewhere else. So to do that, I'm going to hold down my Option key. And with my mouse, I'm going to click if it's a single point, or if it's like a line, I can draw what I want to use as a source. Okay, so then when I move my mouse around, I can see I've picked up this red. You can see that? And it's still red if I put it over here. Okay, before I start doing it, my brush is a little bit big. I can go back here and I can change the size, but I can also use my bracket keys on my keyboard just to change the size. Okay, so I'm going to do Option, click, and then I'm going to use this here. Okay, and then I'm going to come up here and fix this one. I'm going to choose from here this time. Option, click to choose there. Okay, when I do over here, I'm going to choose from here. Option, click. And I'm going to choose from here to do these hairs. That one's a little tricky. So I'm going to re-choose again. Okay, as you can see me working on this, the key to successful clone stamping is to just keep re-choosing a source point. Don't try to choose one color in one area and put it over the whole photo because it's going to look really sloppy and unrealistic. Okay, and then if you want to see a before and after, if I click on the eyeball here and take it off, that's making that layer invisible, and then I put it back on, and that's my after. I would always zoom back out and make sure it actually looks good before you finalize it. And that is the clone stamp tool.